Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Brews and Bytes talk series. We have some great guests and a very good topic today. Big files, big storage, big problems. I think it's very relevant to what's going on today. A lot of organizations are struggling with moving and transferring files from wherever they are and enabling workflows, and obviously those need to be stored somewhere. As always with Brews and Bytes, it's conversational. If you want to ask questions, go ahead and ask them throughout the presentation. There's also some great attachments that we've attached if you want to go ahead and access those. And with that, let's go ahead and get started and introduce our speakers. We have Robert Browne from Signiant. Robert, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and where you come from and where you came from?
Sure. Quickly, I'm Robert Browne. I founded Signiant, so I've been with the company for 20 years. My roles in the company have been varied, everything from leading engineering, doing strategic account development, global geographic territory development, vertical market development, and so on. So I really I appreciate the product in the industry from all perspectives, because I've been in them all, from both the technology to the customer needs and customer needs on a global basis.
And I'm from Caringo. We have TW Cook. TW, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Adrian. I'm the Vice President of Engineering and Services at Caringo. I've been in the company for over 10 years now. Prior to that, I've had a variety of roles in software research, software development, IT, a little bit all over the map.
Yeah, so we have a ton of experience on this one. And I'm curious, so this is Brews and Bytes. So we have to let everyone know what we're drinking. What brew are you drinking, Robert? We'll start with you first.
I'm drinking a coffee.
A coffee, okay.
It is 2 o'clock here, but still a bit early for an adult beverage.
That's good. We like coffee. TW, what are you drinking?
I've also got coffee. In the office, we use a Rutamai as a Austin local roaster and importer. And I kind of got to missing that coffee in my quarantine, so I went out and found some of those beans so I could duplicate the office experience here at home. So I've got the official Caringo blend here.
Well, there you go. And I guess I'm not as experienced as you two, so I just have a LaCroix. It's a little warm here in San Diego. I think it's going to get to around 90, so I want something a little refreshing.
They make iced coffee, you know.
Nice.
Yeah, they do make iced coffee. See, I'm learning already from both of you. So next time I'll have iced coffee. And to the topic, big files, big storage, big problem. The landscape is fluid. Everything's changing and everything's evolving out there. Robert, why don't you start with a description of what Signiant does and how you've seen things change in recent months?
Sure. So Signiant provides intelligent file transfer products and across the board for automated system-to-system file transfers, as well as user-initiated file transfers between any storage endpoints on-prem or in the cloud. Our products are relied upon by some of the world's largest organizations, certainly in the media and entertainment industry. We have pretty much every major and mid to small company, very large penetration across the globe. But we also play in other markets where there's big files that are high value files. So in oil and gas, it might be seismic or well log data for part of their research or well operations. Life sciences, moving around genome data for research purposes, or medical imaging, again, for research purposes. High tech for multi-site software development and so on. So we play in many vertical markets, but certainly dominate the media and entertainment industry. Our newest products are SaaS-based, and we move, on behalf of our customers, petabytes of content every day.
When you say big files, just go ahead and set the stage there. What do you mean by big files?
Boy, that covers the gamut. We've got customers moving, relatively small files, but when you start getting into 4K and HK video files, we've got single files that are in the tens, hundreds of gigabytes, payloads, single payloads that go into the terabytes, multi-terabytes. So again, there's no real limit in our software. with respect to the size of file and the amount of data you can move. The limits will be more the practical limits of your networking, the storage capacity, or time.
Yeah, and that's a good segue to the big storage. That's the reason I asked about the big files. So TW, walk us through what Caringo does and what we mean by big storage.
Well, all of those files that Robert is moving around the internet have to land somewhere and need to be stored. Caringo's core product is object storage, software-defined storage using various commodity hardware. Our real specialty is in extremely flexible, high performance, extremely scalable storage. You can speak S3 to it. You can mount it as a file system if you like. And that's another business that's really exploding right now because stuff is getting bigger and bigger all the time. Increased video resolution means that storing a movie or something takes a lot more than it once did.
Yeah, and how many Caringo stores big files, but what's the average or maybe the maximum amount of files that you've ever heard of in one of our clusters?
Maximum number of files?
Maximum number of files.
We've got a customer that's got, on the order of 10 billion.
Yeah.
I just wanted that particular customer has really small files, and it's kind of funny because I thought there would be, sort of a bell curve of, there would be an average file size, but it's really kind of the other way around. You either have really little or really big files. There's not so much in between, at least in our customer base. So.
Yeah, and that's the reason I wanted to bring it up. There's this notion of big files. It isn't just about file size. It could also be about file count. And I think both organizations deal with that.
Big file count is harder to deal with than size, really, because the overhead and complexity is all around managing the individual files. Storing one big file is no big deal. Just pour it all onto some disks and you're good.
Yeah, absolutely. And Robert, your organization has always dealt with enabling remote workflows. If you're transferring files, and obviously we're in a very interesting time in our history. What have you seen change over the past 8 to 9 weeks or 8 to 10 weeks?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, the historical trends that we've been seeing over the last 5 years are things like, there's more data. Data sizes are growing. In the media and entertainment industry, there's more formats. There's more content producers with all the OTT over-the-top providers. The sizes are getting bigger with 4K and HK, and so on. And it's true in other industries. It's becoming more and more a data-driven world. The other trend we saw was bigger networks. 5 years ago, it was uncommon to see a 10 gig network into an organization. That's commodity now. And with 5G wireless coming out, we're continuing to see network capacity grow even in the wireless space. And what that means is it opens the door to move more files electronically and over the network. But in the last 90 days, we've seen two major trends. One trend is remote access. So as companies are trying to allow people for their safety and protection reasons work at home, they now have to be able to move the data into their home, whether they're doing editing or some post-work color correction and so on. They've got to be able to upload and download those files, not only quickly, but also securely. So you don't want to jeopardize your security just because people are working remotely, but remote access is one of the biggest trends we're seeing. Another trend is, and it kind of ties together, is centralization of services. So companies now, as their workforce had to work at home and they don't have access to facilities in their offices, are saying, hey, I've got capacity in a different location, or I can use capacity in the cloud. How do I make that available to people? So I'm going to start to centralize. I'm going to put the content in one location and then let people remotely access it on a global basis. So kind of the centralization allows organizations to use capacity that they have in other regions or utilize cloud offerings and then provide the remote access to go with it. So again, I would say centralization of services and remote access are kind of the two big trends that have hit in the last couple months.
Yeah, and TW, I mean, from the storage perspective, I mean, the same question for you and what you're saying from a centralization or remote access perspective.
I think the same trends apply. They're interpreted a little bit differently, but centralization, well, remote access, object storage, because of web protocol access is easy to deal with as remote access. One of the things that goes with that, though, is that it's remote from everyone. So one of our biggest customers they have 15 to 20 petabyte clusters. And the guy administering those and who is responsible for adding capacity can go once a week to the facility. So everything has to be doable remotely. Automated management, automated expansion, where all you have to do is wheel in some hardware and boot it up, rather than installing and reconfiguring, is absolutely critical for these times. It's important anyway, but there's really no alternative to that right now. Having to do massive storage reconfiguration right now is just a non-starter. So we're seeing some of the same things. The network capacity, Robert's comments, is pretty interesting, because in a storage system like us, the network is always the bottleneck. It's never the disks. And that increased network capacity that people are installing both into the facility and within the facility, it's really been a win for us, because it enables us to be more high performance by removing one of the key bottlenecks. But I think that the remote access and the unexpected growth of those central facilities. So now that people have decided to centralize, they're putting more stuff there, and maybe they didn't have a plan for what are we going to do about when it fills up. So the ability to deal with that is front and center right now.
I guess that's interesting. I mean, from a centralization standpoint, there are people managing things underneath the cloud, right? And I think that's what a lot of people think. Hey, I'll just send everything to the cloud. But ultimately, someone's managing somewhere. So from an automation perspective, from a big storage and a big files perspective, what should organizations be looking at from an automation perspective? Like, what are the characteristics of solutions that they really need to pay attention to? Maybe we'll start with UTW, and then we'll go back to you, Robert, this one.
I think for us, the big thing that people don't really think about is, what are we going to do if this works? So we're going to do some pilot, or we're going to do a project. We're going to install a storage system. And Elizabeth works as we plan, and we decide we're going to use a lot of it. How expandable is it? What's the degree of automation? How many people does it take to administer it? As you say, somewhere there's actually some physical storage that's been installed somewhere, and there's someone whose job is to keep it up and running. And what they have to do, a big part of the cost of that storage is, what's the level of effort to keep it happy and healthy, and to grow it when you need to. So, the one thing that I think people fail to take into account is success. And this, when you decide to do this centralization and growth, are you positioned for that? It's one of the things we spent an enormous amount of engineering on in the past 10 years, is making the storage system deal with most of that stuff automatically, so that human intervention isn't required.
Robert, same question to you as far as automation and centralization. What should organizations really be paying attention to?
Well, one of the key values of our products is we're SaaS-based. So what that means is the control plane, where a lot of the web interfaces, the reporting analytics, the authentication, and so on, we host that in the cloud. So there's nothing for our customers to do there at all. They'll move the content to and from their storage endpoints, wherever those may be. So they need to still manage those. But with remote access, and we've turned up, there's probably 40 or 50 new customers that have come on board for the sole or increase their footprint for the sole purpose of centralizing and moving things to the cloud. And a lot of the values of our software came out. So, one of the first one is, when you centralize these services, you have to allow remote access, not just by local users, but by global users. So you need to be able to move this content anywhere in the world with good performance and high consistent performance. You also need to make sure it's secure, so that you're not opening up your data to attack in any way. Also, things like tracking. Another thing we found, we have what's called protocol failover in our product. So as people are connecting, will try to connect with UDP first to give the best performance. But if they can't connect, they'll try TCP or HTTP. As people started going to work at home, some ISPs may block UDP traffic. So other products may just fail, whereas we'll fail over and we'll try every protocol until we find one that works, because some performance is better than no performance. And another attribute that really came out was ease of use. The speed at which people have had to react to COVID. They've been trying to turn things up, not going through extensive POCs and user trials. We've had customers literally check out the product and be in production within 2 days. And one of the attributes is ease of use. And that's not just ease of use for the administrators to set it up. It's mostly ease of use for the end user. Because if I onboard hundreds of users, I have zero time to train them. The product has to be simple, intuitive, and all the power that you're providing to them has to be done so in a way that completely hides the complexity and makes it, again, simple, intuitive, and obvious for the customers to use the product. So that's been very beneficial for us. A lot of the attributes of our product have really shone in this crazy time.
So from a development perspective, how difficult would you say making something easy to use is, or making your product easy to use is?
It is 90% of the complexity. It's a great question. Often, you can get something working and, you can expose all kind of nerd knobs to people and, try to tune this and do this and do that. And it's not practically usable for people. Again, there's all kinds of quotes and things you can say about it, but it's really a large portion of the development effort is designed to make these highly complex things trivial and easy to use.
TW, same question to you. I mean, from the big storage perspective, how difficult is it to make it easy to use, easy to manage?
Well, it's the same for us. There's an enormous amount of engineering under the hood, and that's one of the things that I think people don't always appreciate. In our world, well, disks fail all the time. So one of the questions is, what happens when a disk fails? Do you have to do something? You don't want to have to do something. As Robert says, you really want that to all be under the hood. You want it to just do the right thing, figure it out, just like the protocol failover you're talking about. So, you have hardware failure, the storage needs to be able to reconfigure it around, reprotect your data without someone having to actually understand what's going on and deal with the user interface. The best user interface is no user interface, because the software just did the right thing. And that's something that we don't, we have a lot of competitors out there that are, their stuff works, it's cheap. But when you start dealing with failures and reconfiguration, I think the difference starts to turn up.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about big files and big problems. And as we're having this conversation, it just dawned on me. I think we both have some of the same challenges when we're trying to communicate the values of our technology. We always get the question, hey, why can't I just go to Fry's and buy a bunch of Buffalo NASs? Right? And I'm sure, Robert, you get the same question. Why can't I just email these large files or FTP them around? So we'll start with you, Robert. Why can't you just email these large files or FTP them around, or use some of the old ways to transfer large files?
Well, yeah. Well, first off, email is an easy one, because pretty much every email system on the planet has limitations in terms of the size of file you can attach, and that only addresses one of many use cases, which is basically sending files between people, and that's a relatively small portion of the use cases that we experience. It doesn't do automated system-to-system transfers. Oh yeah, so then you can use FTP. Which isn't going to be performant on a global basis. It's not going to be reliable. Any of the automation and tracking and reporting and all that, you got to build all that stuff around it. Certainly not easy to use. So, companies who are still using FTP are prime targets for our media shuttle product, and we seldom have issues. Even simple things like the reliability. With FTP, if you have a large transfer that fails, you need to restart. We have checkpoint restart. You start where you left off. And we've seen this heavily too with this new work at home remote access, the efficiency of which you can do things. So I mentioned the protocol failover to make sure you can get connectivity, but then the checkpoint restart to make sure that you can resume where you left off. We even have features that allow you to pre-validate the content before you send it. So if the customer or the recipient is expecting a certain set of files in certain formats, you can pre-validate it to make sure that you don't send 10 gig of content to somebody only to find out later that you sent them the wrong content. When you're downloading files, again, this would be very germane to work at home. Somebody may be sending me 10 large files, but there's one file I need right now that I can start working on and let the other files be downloaded in the background. That's point and click in our products. So there's all these value-added features around reliability, ease of use, efficiency, and then also you've got to be able to work with multiple storage types, whether it's file store, object store, and do that in a reliable, efficient way. So if you're looking at doing multi-part file uploads, what's the optimal part size? We take care of all that. We've got a machine learning algorithm in our product, and we'll dynamically determine based on the size of the file what the optimal file parts are. We shield all that complexity. If you use something like FTP, it's like saying I have an engine, now I'm going to go build the car around it. And there's anybody who's sat in a car knows there's a whole lot of intellectual property and intelligence that goes into the remaining components of the car beyond the engine.
Yeah, absolutely. And TW, same question to you. Why can't I just go and buy a bunch of NASs at Fry's? They have a sale today. I could get a bunch of them for $100.
It's a great deal.
And just, yeah.
So, Robert's last comment about hiding complexity is really part of it. So you could go do that. Now you got 10 boxes. Let's say you bought 10 of them. You got 10 boxes and you stored something. You have to remember which of the 10 you put it on. If it was important, you probably got to put it on 2 of them. So you got an extra copy of it. So you got to remember which 2 you put it on. If one of them melts down, then you got to figure out what got lost and, can you recover it and where you're going to get it from. Whereas if you put all of that, so you took more or less the same hardware and put it into a storage cluster, you just got one storage cluster. It's basically handling all of that stuff for you. You basically provide some parameters about how protected you want things to be. The defaults are reasonable, but you could optimize that for footprint or whatever you want. But basically just store something. You don't worry about where it is. You get it back, it'll be there because the storage system is going to make sure that if the box that you put it on burns up or disappears or whatever, that your data is still there. And, handling that complexity automatically so that you don't have to know where it is. You don't have to know which box it's on. You don't have to even know really what kinds of hardware you got. We can mix and match whatever. That turns out to be a really big deal from a user perspective. There's one big namespace. You put it all in and you store whatever you want. Anyone that knows the name and has access privileges can get it. Rather than dealing with a bunch of independent things. That's the problem in general with file systems is that there's too many of them. And if you want to add some capacity, sometimes you can do that. But not having to worry about that anymore is really the value here.
Yeah, and that's a good segue to, you mentioned the value props, but what should organizations really be listening for as indicators that they need to move to your solution? So we'll start with you, Robert. Like if someone's sitting in a meeting and what should they be listening for? And it should pop open a little light bulb and they have to say, hey, I got to call Signiant. Yeah.
If they're trying to transfer files, whether it's automated system to system or between people, whether you're trying to facilitate collaboration with the file transfer, we really cover a gambit of workflows and offer solutions for a wide range of file transfer requirements. So typically big files, high value files, if you're just trying to share your photos with your family, go use Flickr or something else. You don't really need our software. But if it's, business critical, high value, big files, any associated workflow or use case, you should talk to Signiant.
TW, same question to you. What should people be listening for in a meeting to say, hey, I got to call Caringo?
Well, part of that is, I can't afford to lose this thing. So how can I make sure that when I store this, it's going to be there? Part of it's about, where is it? If you're starting to have people that are worried about, I can't we've got too many places to store things. Can't figure out what's where. That's a clue. The other thing is you're spending an enormous amount of time on migrations and stuff because adding capacity was hard with the solution you've got. There's a lot of trigger points like that, but ultimately, it's, do you care about your data? And if you do, you probably want to have some control over how protected it is. And we can give you the precise control you want.
Yeah. And, we're talking about big files and big storage. So is there this concept of being too big? I mean, are there files too big to transfer where you recommend, hey, you got to handle those where you create them, or TW on your side? Is there just storage that's too big that says, hey, we got to figure out another solution here? So we'll start with you, Robert. Is there such a thing as a file that's too big?
Oh, theoretically, no. Like if I have infinite bandwidth and infinite storage capacity and infinite time, I can move an infinitely large file. But that's not real world. So, we're usually limited by the network capacity or the time in which, people are trying to move, a petabyte of content over a 100 megabit link in 5 minutes. Well, we still haven't figured out how to defy the laws of physics, but we're working on it. It's usually where connectivity is limited. So if somebody's doing a remote shoot in the middle of a desert where there's no network connectivity, well, you really don't have the option to do electronic file transfer. We see that going away as both terrestrial networks as well as 5G wireless networks roll out, that there's really good network connectivity pretty much everywhere. But there are still some cases, again, where if you're doing a remote shoot out in the middle of nowhere where there's no network, that would be about the only time I would say, you got to start thinking about shipping drives.
Yeah. TW, same question to you.
Bring it on.
Bring it on. Test our limits.
Test our limits. So realistically, with erasure coding, we have the ability to take an arbitrarily large file and break it up into individual managed segments, apply protection, sort of like RAID, but at the object level. So we can deal with some incredibly large files. So there's the bandwidth limitation. It may take you a really long time to store that file. One of our QA guys was playing around with storing 64 terabyte files, and it takes a while to write those babies. But we can do it, and we're really pretty well equipped to deal with extremely large files, with both large numbers of files and large files. So we don't have anyone's pushed that limit yet, and we'd love to try it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You both, it comes down to the network. And I mean, both organizations deal with complex solutions. And as we kind of start to wrap up here, I mean, where does someone get started? I mean, these are very complex problems, complex workflows, lots of moving parts. So where do you recommend someone get started with maybe evaluating not only your solution, but the workflows that they want to move to your solution? We'll start with you, Robert, and then same question to you, TW.
Well, again, because most of our products are SaaS-based, it's super easy for us to stand up proof of concepts. Like we've literally had calls in the morning that have gone to live proof of concepts that afternoon, and they've been in production the next day. Now, it takes procurement and everybody else to be lined up to do that, but we have done that. So I would say certainly start with our website, Signiant.com. There's pretty good descriptors of the products there and what the various products do and how they work. Reach out to me. Again, I think once we know what it is you're trying to do, we can very, very quickly tell you which product is the best fit, and then why, or the values that it will provide across the board, from performance to reliability to ease of use and so on. So again, reach out to me, go to our website. But again, I think the first thing is understand what it is you're trying to do, be able to describe that. And it could be one or many workflows or use cases. Once we know that, we can reply very, very quickly.
TW, same question to you.
Well, to understand what you're trying to do is key in both cases. In our world, we've got a really broad range of storage capability. We can sell you a box that's a single server, contains an entire storage cluster and the whole ecosystem that goes with it. So you could literally just basically wheel it in, plug it in, and use it. And a lot of our customers like to start there, and maybe for remote offices and stuff, that's all you'll ever need. But we can certainly scale it all the way up to multiple petabyte clusters, and we'd be happy to work with you on that. There's always the trade-off between cost and density and network and things like that that we probably need to look at your workflow, figure out what your use case is. But we've got people who would be happy to help with that.
Well, I think we answered our question. Big storage, big files, big problem. I think collectively, it's not a big problem, right? It's everything. Every problem has a solution, right? It's just about architecting it in the correct way. And with that, I mean, words of wisdom. Yeah. Any closing words of wisdom? So I think we started with Robert. We'll start with you, TW. Any closing words of wisdom for our viewers out there?
I think ultimately expect the unexpected is it. Certainly the world situation we're in was pretty unexpected by a lot of us. But the flexibility that you get from a storage solution like ours allows you to react to that. So think about what would happen if it works and you need to use it a whole lot more. Where do you go from there?
That's good advice. Robert, how about you? Words of wisdom.
Well, a pretty similar answer in that our products are so flexible and reusable. It's not uncommon at all that a customer buys our product to solve a certain problem, and before they've even implemented the solution for that, they've deployed it to solve 2 other problems. So the flexibility and agility, and especially in today's times, are really important. And also, when looking at file transfer solutions, don't just look at speed. That's obviously important, but it's all the intelligence that gets built around it. It's the ability to secure the product, be able to maximize the interoperability with storage platforms, whether it's object or file store, anywhere in the world, the ease of use, the reliability factors around validating content before you even send it, protocol failover, I've mentioned a bunch, file ordering, and so on. Really look at all of the things that are important to file transfer, not just a speed bake-off, because you're really only looking at one of the important elements there.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. And with that, I'd just like to thank both of you and definitely thank our viewers. As I mentioned, there's attachments to this video, to this webcast. Go ahead and download those. If you have any questions, you can always email them to info@caringo.com. If you have any Signiant specific questions, Robert, I'll let you go ahead and say the website once again so I don't misspell it.
Oh, it's Signiant.com. It's Signiant.com. And feel free to send me an email as well. My email address is rbrowne, RBROWNE, @Signiant.com. Feel free to send me an email and I'll make sure you get your questions answered.
All right. And I think everything, contact info and websites are also in the resource list in case you didn't write those down. And thank you for your time. Thank you so much, Robert. We loved having you on, and TW, always great to talk to you.
My pleasure.
All right.
Stay safe, everybody.
Yeah, definitely. All right. See you, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye now.